Next golf video. We've got a fair amount taken apart already, but now we're going to move on to the lower section of the car. So that's like seats and carpets and things like that. Useful for you because if you've plugged your car in and because you had like an airbag fault and it's come up saying that maybe one of your seat airbags has got a problem, or maybe you've got like a seatbelt issue or something like that. You'll be able to see how to take your seats out and everything, what's going on underneath them. Also, cars, like this, getting a bit older, so seals can sometimes leak and things, and that's when you start to get horrible soggy carpets, loads of damp. We can show you how to get to all of that, access it all, so you can then hopefully find where that leak's coming in, because you'll be able to see where the water's tracking down and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a lot to take out, but actually it's not too difficult. It's just kind of big stuff now. So yeah.
And of course, most importantly, it's part of our whole dismantling part of the car. With all of the episodes that we're doing and we're filming on a weekly basis, we're going to be left with a nice empty shell of a car. Now, we appreciate that all of you can't just do this in terms of evenings and weekends. You don't want to suddenly strip your car apart and then it not be functional for you or your family. So ultimately, we're quite lucky in that respect that we can have this car, it's not being used, and we're going to have it stripped out. But once it's all stripped out, we then start the exciting stuff of starting off with routing cables, doing the sound deadening and everything else.
These seats are held in by a size 10 or M10 spline bit. You've got 4 of these spline bolts that are just holding it down. So obviously you just get in there, wind those out, and then obviously if you rock the back of the seat forwards, you've got more angle for tilting it back, and then that will give you then access for the plugs that are going on underneath the seat. So obviously you can't just lift it all out, because otherwise you could break the plugs and then you'll be in more trouble. But it does at least show you then what's going on in terms of if you had some sort of airbag issue or a seatbelt issue or something like that. I don't know if these ever had like heated seats or anything, but all of that is then done in this area in terms of plugs and all that sort of stuff. So down, the loom comes off the bottom of the seat over here, and then you've then got a yellow plug just here, which is always your airbag plug, and then the other one will be to do with seatbelt recognition. So if it wasn't working, the car wouldn't know if your seatbelt was plugged in or not. So I'm going to unplug those, and then we can lift the seat out, and then we've got more access that if you knew you just had some sort of leak in this corner, you'd be able to get this piece of trim out, which we'll do in a minute, and then you'd be able to kind of start lifting to see how much water you had in there and things like that. But we'll get to that point in a minute. But I have found 20p, so bonus. Look at that.
Right, so removing the first part of the bench seat, I've simply got my hands under both sides at the front and given them a bit of a wiggle and lift it up, because there's 2 sort of U-clips on here. On a lot of modern cars we work on, the U-clips will come out with the plastic receptor in there, and you have to remove that, and it's a bit fiddly. Some cars we even just buy in replacements. But before you actually can remove the back part, you've got the Isofix. This is a plastic Isofix fixing, and this is for modern or more modern car seats. And what this does is this allows you to buy a car seat that clips into the safety rail at the back, rather than you having the old-fashioned ones that then plug in through. So if you've got something like this, it's important that you take it out and put it back in properly. They are a little bit fiddly. You can see here a little hook system on here. So once you have wiggled it out both sides, you then need to push it forward so that the bar slips down through the gap and allows you to remove all of that. So I've removed all 4 of those. We've got our 2 front clips lifted, but with all of these seats, they don't just come out. There's actually a metal bar at the back. So what you need to do is you actually need to push with your knee the seat backwards, and it just lifts up. But once the seat's out, I'll show you that. So what we can do here is then just give the seat a bit of a wiggle. And the same on this side. You've got the seat belts that you can then push through. Right, so just the same as we've just struggled then, this seat probably has never been out, but either way, the double seat here, or the seat belt, and the single one was really happy in its little area, so we had to really force that out to get the back part of the cushion out. Once you've done that, the seat becomes free. But if I just turn this seat over, you'll see here on both corners, you've got your locating lug. Now this locating lug actually clips onto the back part of the seat here and secures. Actually it's this bit here, so if I just move that there, Sammy can get obviously there's all sorts of dirt in here, but this is the locating lug here that then locks onto here. So that's why once you've undone your front clip, you just give it a bit of a shove backwards and it releases it off that hook. And now we can safely pull the back seat out the way and put it somewhere safe. So whilst Richard's continuing to get the front seat out, all I've done is remove the bench seats. Removing these is a hell of a lot more time consuming and difficult, but the most important thing at the moment is then getting this upper part or the diagonal part of the plastic trim out. So to do that, I'm just going to put the seat forward. And this is a 60/40 seat, so you've got access to this plastic trim. Now when the chaps were then removing the rear quarter panels, one of the screws they unscrewed is now helping me to be able to get my hand in behind here like so. Now we're using a metal trim tool. This is obviously a professional workshop tool with a little bit of padding on here, but if you've got plastic ones, it's not really a big deal, you can do that. Now all I'm doing now is I'm using my eyes to look down through the trim to see what clips we've got and whether they're going to cause a problem. And I can see just on here, which I'm something that the camera won't be able to see, is I can just see one of the body clips in here. So I can just release that with the trim tool. But remember, every time you remove a clip, is actually look for the bit that it clips into so that you can reinstate it on here, because otherwise when we rebuild this and do the sound system in here, we don't want bits of trim rattling and causing a problem. Now this bit here should safely start to release and slide up at this point. So what we can do is we can just lift it up like so and see where else we've got a clip on here. Let me just pop the seat back up, see if there's anything that we're missing. So on here, funnily enough, covered by dust and dirt, the only other retaining lug down here is covered in dirt. So let's just get that out of the way, and I'm just going to quickly go and grab a 10mm T-bar from the toolbox. That 10mm T-bar is going to sit over there. Now, thank you very much. We couldn't see that a few minutes ago because it was absolutely covered in quite a few years of dust and dirt. So if you haven't got a T-bar, a socket with an extension on, no problem at all. But this is a 10mm, we're just going to pop it over the top, undo that little nut over the top. Once we've undone that nut and removed that, put that safe with the clip that you're going to reinstate, this whole plastic leg or plastic arm will then lift up and you're able to slide it out of the way. And again, just do a quick visual as you turn it over. Do a quick visual, make sure you haven't broken anything or left any lugs off. Now this plastic trim that I talked about earlier, this is going to go back on here. So what I'll do is I'll line it back up and make sure that that's on the plastic trim, ready to clip back on.
So once seats and things are out, and then you've got all these side trims and things out, which is just on standard kind of pull clips and things, you can see just how much access you've got to everything. So even if you're just going down to the route of giving your car a real good kind of detailed clean and you want to really get in and hoover everything out, now you've got full access. But you've also got access to other things as well. So like I said, if you were trying to find some sort of leak, if you had some sort of electrical problem that your VCDS had brought up, you can then get to those areas that are harder to get to and find them. You've also, in the back here, on the rear seat, you've got all your access to your, top of your fuel tank and things, fuel sender and all things like that. So that then gives you access, and you've got room to move because you've now not got big bulky seats in the way. And then, if you were doing like a sound system run, so you were running power cables and phono leads and things like that, you've now, you don't have to take the full carpet out, but you've got a lot more access to be able to lift and get through and get to different areas to be able to run stuff. So yes, granted, we might be able to take seats out quicker than you might be able to, but really it's not too difficult. You can look in half an hour, whip a seat out, and then you've got all your bits of your bolts and fixings and stuff, and they're all safe, and then you've got acres of room just to work. So if you were doing this on a weekend, you can start in the morning, then do your later afternoon, cracking on running all your stuff, and then by the evening or the next morning, you can start wanging it all back in, and you've made real good progress without having to just tuck stuff in horrible places, or you've found those issues you've been looking for. So we're now going to carry on, take out all this center console because the carpet will be going up underneath all this, so we can't just pull it out and over it. So we're going to take out all of this now, and then we'll be able to get to the carpet, which is the main top bit, and then there's also like an underlay, like your carpets at home basically, that we'll also need to take out, and then we can look at what we'll be doing next, and also we can show you what's going on underneath here, because it's a lot busier than you might previously think.
One other thing to add is, if you're like us, neat and tidy, then one of the things that we will be doing is any wires that we run down the side of the car will be cable tied, and we're going to give the carpet a really good hoover out, because there's not many people that are going to take their seats out to want to hoover, but there are detailers out there. If you really love your pride and joy, then you might want to do this to give it the full works, like Richard has said. So the next part obviously is getting the center console out so that we can then get the carpet removed, which we're going to do shortly. Those of you watching that are thinking this is pretty daunting, to be fair, we don't have a magic encyclopedia that tells us on how to remove every single item that we work on. A lot of the things we've done over the last 22 years has been trial and error as well. But if you don't try something, then you're never going to succeed. And in many respects, taking something apart like this before, in all the years that I've been taking Golfs apart, whether it's down here for filling hands-free kits or in here to replace the or to fit a USB socket or something like that, even is more involved as replacing handbrake cables. There are lots of screws. With a Volkswagen car in particular, they can be either over-engineered or in some cases incredibly simple. A lot of the older cars can be over-engineered, and you find that they've put screws in all sorts of crazy places that don't need it. But as you can see, Richard is still dismantling now, and we've been in many cars spending a lot of time just trying to get this aspect out and realise that it's all just a massive jigsaw puzzle. The only thing I would say to you is write it down. If you want to take things apart in sections, put it down on the floor so that you've got an idea of where it came from. If you want to, where you've taken screws out, put those screws back in after you have removed the items so that you know that that particular size screw with that particular size head or the thread, you know that it's going to go in there and not be left with screws left over, which is the worst thing, because also then you're going to get things like creaks and other bits and pieces. We're nearly at that point where this is ready to come out, but because we've got to get a bit more of the center console out, this is what Richard's doing currently. Right, so the next bit for us here is so that we can proceed with this front section of the center console. Richard's unscrewed probably around 6 screws, I believe, just to get the glove box assembly out. Again, it's always a T20 Torx that you need. Having a head torch is also pretty handy because these screws can sometimes be up and underneath and quite difficult to see. We also use a little side ratchet, which is really handy because you can stick your thumb on the ratchet, use the little arm and get into these little hidey holes. At the same time, I'm working on the driver's side. As it happens, our headlight switch is cracked and broken from the previous owner, so that will come out and get replaced. And then we need to remove both sides of the dashboard to allow us to access these bits to remove the central bars. And again, as I said a few minutes ago, these things can be over-engineered and we don't have a crystal ball, so this is what we're working on now. Made a bit of a breakthrough and this is where you can easily waste 30 minutes. So if you've got family, partner, children, then you need to be making sure you've got the right time to do this. If you haven't, then fine, you can do what you need to do. But we have this originally looked like a really well sealed piece of plastic, but actually we've realized that this flexes quite a bit. So underneath this little panel here, which Richard's got off, and we'll just show you that panel, this little panel here is just clipped in. Once you've removed that panel, there's 2 screws that Richard could see but couldn't quite access and see how they were fitting in, because a lot of these bits of trim just have got little hooks and they hook up and in and then they get fixed down at the back. So using a plastic trim tool, just for the safety side of things, you can actually find if you flex the plastic a little bit, you normally create little gaps, and those little gaps are really handy just to get your finger in. Once you've got your finger in there, the trim tool should do the rest, because let's just unclip that all the way around. You also need to be careful because this has been sat here for 20 odd years. You don't want well, not 20 years, it's not a 20-year-old car, but you don't want to start breaking stuff. So both panels removed, and this is a little gadget that is again handy. This one's got a little extension on, but it can only be, I mean, you can find these online, really handy. So I'm just gonna lean up inside there. Okay, so we're almost done. We've been battling with the centre console. That's all been out. It's fiddly. If you're not nimble fingered, then you really need to get a professional in to help you with something like this, especially with the handbrake gaiter that moves up and down. One thing we have got left to do before the carpet should in theory come out, and that's just to unbolt the main handbrake assembly, release the adjustment mechanism, because we don't want to do what a lot of people do and then just slice the carpet to work around things, because we don't want to be cutting corners. We want the carpet then to come out, be cleaned and hoovered, ready to go back in. The other thing we will do is we'll fix up the two top of the B pillars ready so that they don't get lent on and broken, and then we should be ready to go. Yeah, and there's always a lot more going on underneath the trim and things. You know, you've got all your air ducting and stuff, and it's just really a case of if you can feel that something doesn't quite want to go, it's normally because there's a screw, so you have to go hunting around for it. Now, admittedly, in the 7 years I've been doing this, I've not taken a Golf 5 apart as much as this, but because I've taken apart many different cars, I can apply that similar logic in terms of, is it a clip or does it feel like a screw? As James said, you can't just go in pulling stuff out, because that's when you'll break things. You do have to be nimble fingered and just have a bit of a think about it and have a feel, and you will find them and get in there. Admittedly, with this centre area here and that kind of handbrake gaiter that I had to go along and separate, probably not the way to do it in that order, but I knew I could get it all separated, so I thought if I take it all apart around it, that will then give us the room to get everything else out, and then I'll just work out how it needs to go back in when we put it back in. And I'll probably talk about that when we come to finally put everything back in and work out how it goes back together. But now, yeah, next step is just take the last few bits out, and then we can lift the carpet and see what's going on underneath. We'll find some more treasures.